First of all, hello, welcome to Hey Ask Me Stuff. Man, I'm having a frazzled evening tonight. Welcome to Hey Ask Me Stuff, the show where you out there in the internet land get to ask me stuff. My name is Ken Coughlin. I'm a Christian apologist coming at you from Trinity Lutheran Church and School in Joppa, Maryland. I apologize for breathing a little heavy here and obviously forgetting to unmute my mic and being a few minutes late. You ever have those times where it's like time's going so slowly and you're looking, it's like, I got plenty of time. Let me do this other project. Oh, I got plenty of time. Okay, take care of this project. And for some reason, it's the last 30 minutes before whatever the deadline is. You're like, where the heck did those go? The 30 minutes beforehand, took forever. It was a standstill. And then this 30 minutes, you look down and all of a sudden they're done. They're over. So I apologize for that, but that's what was going on. Anyway, my name's Ken Coughlin. Welcome to the show. For those of you that have never watched before, the way this works is it's all audience participation. You out there in the internet lands get to submit questions. And the way you submit a question is you go here to this website, trinityjoppa.org/askmestuff. And on that website, you will find a form that you can fill out and you can submit a question to be considered for a future episode. The questions can be anything that has to do with Christianity or is Christianity adjacent, like I like to put it. So if there's specifically something about Christian beliefs that you don't understand or want clarified, that's fine. If there is something about other world religions or atheism that you're wondering about, also fine. Some Bible difficulties. Maybe there's something you read in the Bible that is troubling you. Great. Throw it in there. Anything that's Christianity or Christianity adjacent, I like to say. Don't ask me how to bake a souffle. I have no idea. All right. My cooking skills are limited to backyard barbecue kind of cooking skills. All right. That's who I am. I'm the guy who cooks steak and barbecue chicken. All right. So beyond that, I can't help you. Apologetic stuff, Christianity stuff, questions of faith. Got you covered. All right. So also one little preliminary here is to ask you to, hey, if you haven't subscribed to the YouTube channel, go ahead and do so. Last I checked, now when I was on the air 2 weeks ago, I can't remember exactly where we were at, and I apologize. I was really busy. I didn't have a show last week. But I want to say 2 weeks ago, we were really close to our goal. We had told you we had set a goal of 2,500 subscribers to be hit by the end of June was what we were hoping for. Even that was a revised goal. The original goal was 2,000, but we blew that out of the water back in January. And so we set at 2,500. And I know we weren't quite there yet last week, but we were almost there. Well, as we sit here right now, as I'm talking to you, we're 2,560. So thank you all very much for subscribing to the YouTube channel, helping us spread the gospel in this way. If you have not yet subscribed, you're still welcome to jump on the bandwagon. Please subscribe to the YouTube channel. We got a lot of great content here on the Trinity Joppa channel other than just this podcast. I don't remember what else I was going to say. Oh, I know what else I was going to say. Just as a quick introduction, another thing that I do like to tell people as we get started is that if you have more questions, if you're looking for to dive deeper into whether it be some topic that you've heard here on Hey Ask Me Stuff or just pretty much anything else, you can go right here to kencoughlin.org. kencoughlin.org is a free website. All of the resources are completely free. Nothing's behind a paywall. And it's basically everything that I've created for the past, I did the math on this the other day, 17 years, I think, roughly, that I was, at least everything from the past 17 years that I was able to get my hands on. I still have a few things that I just recently discovered that I got to get on there. But one really, anyway, you can see the website here. There's a menu on the left where everything is, topically arranged. You can narrow it down, or you can come down here and there's a search bar, so you can search for something you want. One thing that I did want to highlight that is now on the website, is always the latest shorts, is this right here. So here's an interesting story. So this past Sunday night, I was just hanging out on the internet and doing some Google searching, and I came across I actually didn't see it. It didn't process it at first. I actually navigated away and then hit the back button because I was like, wait a minute, did I just read what I thought I read? And I thought I'd seen something with my name, but on the website, reasonablefaith.org. Well, if you know what reasonablefaith.org is. That is the apologetics ministry and theology ministry of Dr. William Lane Craig, who is certainly one of the most preeminent Christian apologists around today. And I sure enough, there was my name, and so I clicked on it to see what it was, and it turns out that it was a page on their website that was an episode of the podcast that he does. And this was the episode called Natural Theology and Luther. Well, when I started watching it, I saw that what the actual podcast was they kind of start out talking about, hey, the guy that's interviewing says, hey, Bill, so today we're going to talk about somebody that reviewed a book of yours, The Blackwell Companion to Natural Theology. And of course, I did a book review of the Blackwell Companion to Natural Theology. It was a video book review I did for an organization called Lutheran Core. It's on their YouTube channel, and you can access it on the website here under book reviews as well. And so I started watching it and realized, so somehow Dr. Craig had found out about this book review and decided to dedicate an episode of his podcast. I don't want to say responding to it, because that makes it sound like he was disagreeing with me, and he really didn't. We agreed on just about everything. There's one finer point in there where I do think he kind of lumped Calvinists and Lutherans in together, and the theology on that was not quite correct. But as far as his book is concerned, he agreed with everything I had to say. So anyway, if you are on the website, you want to give a look at this over on his YouTube channel, go for it. I thought it was pretty cool. So anyway, all right. So that being said, if you are watching us live here on Tuesday night at 6:30, you're invited to be part of the conversation this evening. And you can do that if you're on YouTube by just typing in the YouTube chat. If you have a question, comment, need some clarification, agree with me, disagree with me, put it in the YouTube chat. Should show up here on the screen if I have that correct, and I will also see it on my screen over here. We are also live on the Trinity Joppa Facebook page. I will try to check in on that. I can't necessarily promise that I will see that as readily as I will see the YouTube channel because, well, YouTube's going to show up on the screen. Facebook will not. But if you want to interact with us this evening, if you have questions and comments, whatever, please join in live. If you're not watching us live, still love to hear your thoughts on our topic of this week. And just go ahead and throw your comments in the comments section. We'd love to hear from you. So all the preliminaries out of the way, and that was a lot of them, I know. I'm sorry about that. What is the question for this evening? The question we're going to be talking about is, do we get to choose our own morality? All right. Now, where does this come from? You've probably heard some of the expressions like, well, that's good for you, but not for me, or that's your truth, or that may be right for you, but not so much, that's not right for me, but they love to say, she's living her truth, right? He's living his truth, she's living her truth, whatever it may be. And the idea that's become very popular in today's culture is that everyone gets to live their own truth. They get to decide what is, especially in the moral realm, what is right for them and what is wrong for them, just like you can decide what's right for you and wrong for you. Isn't this great? This is all live and let live, right, folks? We all get to decide, everybody gets to decide for themselves what's right and what's wrong, and none of us should try to impose our moral beliefs on another person. Just let them do their thing and you do your thing, and we all just go about our merry way. Well, I mean, obviously, if you think that through logically, I think most of us can see where that's not really as universally livable as people might want to make it seem. Charles Manson certainly had his moral truth that I would disagree with. And the problem is when one person thinks they have the right to do something and the other person thinks they don't, and what they're doing impacts the other person, well, our differing moral beliefs can come into conflict with each other, can't they? That's why we have laws in this country and in every country to govern relationships, because people don't always respect each other, people don't always agree with each other, and lots of times, they're not always going to agree on what's right and what's wrong. And so we have, from a legal standpoint, from a civil law standpoint, or criminal law, civil in the general sense mean governmental, but obviously within that there's civil. You can sue somebody, or a criminal, you go to jail. From the criminal law standpoint, we have a set of rules that we just say, this is how our society is going to run based upon these sets of rules. So you may agree with them, you may disagree with them, but you're going to have to abide by them, or you're going to end up being punished by the government, right? Anyway, but it's a very popular belief that it is morally correct, it's praiseworthy, it's a good thing to let everybody believe whatever they want to believe. And what I have found in practice is most of the people who say things like this, what they're really saying is they don't want you to tell them what they're doing is wrong. But all too often, they're willing to tell you what you're doing is wrong. As a matter of fact, if you think about it, the very statement that you shouldn't tell other people they're wrong is a statement of them telling you that you're wrong to do that, isn't it? So they're violating their own rule. But I specifically, what inspired me to do this show tonight was a conversation I recently had online with a skeptic who took issue. Actually, it was an old video on my personal YouTube channel that I haven't, heck, I was even thinking about taking it down because I'm just not particularly happy with it. But I just happened to see a comment that I guess this gentleman had posted on this video about 6 months ago or so. And probably foolishly on my part, I decided to go ahead and write a brief response to it. And much to my surprise, even though this was like a 6-month-old comment, this gentleman must be monitoring YouTube frequently, because I want to say within an hour at most, he had replied to my comment, to my response to him, and a discussion went on back and forth. And it was about this. It was about this idea of, which I'll define in a minute, subjective morality versus objective morality. And the idea that, is there such a thing as a set of moral rules that is true independent of whether or not we all think it's true? In other words, even if you think, I may think murder's right, you may think it's wrong. Well, if our subjective belief, but I want to start out by kind of giving you the scriptural basis for what I'm going to be discussing tonight. And I could have gone a number of places, but this is probably the most famous one. John 14:6, Last Supper, right? Jesus answered, I am the way and the truth and the life. No one comes to the Father except through me. Jesus doesn't say here, I am a way, I am one of many truths, or I am my truth. I'm living my truth. That's not what he says. He says he is the truth. There is one truth, and it is represented through the person of Jesus Christ. All right? So understand that as a Christian, as Christians, we don't buy into this whole, you can live your truth, they can live their truth. You may have your own personal beliefs about things, but when your beliefs come up against objective reality, sometimes you're going to get in a whole heap of trouble, right? It's like running into a wall. You may think the wall's not there, but if it really is, you can run into it as many times as you want. It's still going to be there, and you're going to hurt yourself an awful lot. So anyway, let me start out here by defining some terms. Subjective truth and objective truth. And this discussion could get a whole lot broader, but I'm really focusing on the moral realm tonight. A subjective truth is a statement or a proposition that is true for the subject, for the person who is expressing it, so to speak. I've given an example up here. If I were to say mint chocolate chip is the best flavor of ice cream, is that something that is true? Well, it depends on who you ask, doesn't it? If you ask me, the answer to that is yes, that's a true statement. That is absolutely a true statement. Whereas if you ask my wife, she's going to say no, she doesn't like mint. All right, she's going to say no, that's not a true statement. She loves chocolate chip cookie dough, right? Is her favorite. So a subjective truth is something that it is still true, but it's true based upon the subject who believes it or who utters it, who says it. It's the truth is in the subject. I am the subject. I'm the one expressing the statement. So that statement is true just for me, but it does not necessarily expand beyond me. And the question I have at the bottom for you to ponder to start realize where this discussion is going to go is, do other people need to agree or abide by your subjective truths? No, right? Of course not. I mean, I can't kind of force my wife to like mint chocolate chip ice cream better than all the rest. That's not the way subjective truths work. If she has a different opinion about what is the best flavor of ice cream, when we're talking about subjective truths, that's fine. That's perfect. There's nothing wrong with her saying chocolate chip cookie dough is the best flavor of ice cream, because what we understand her to be saying when she does that is she prefers chocolate chip cookie dough over all other flavors of ice cream. Just like when I say this, I'm saying I prefer mint chocolate chip over all other flavors of ice cream. And that's a true statement, because it's a statement about me, or in her case, a statement about her. We're not trying to make a statement broader than that. All right? Now, let's contrast that with objective truth. All right, an objective truth is a truth statement or a proposition that is true for the object, for the thing we're talking about. Its truth lies in the thing we're talking about. I gave an example here. If I drop my laptop off the cliff, it will fall. All right? Now, is that just a statement that's true in the same way as the statement about mint chocolate chip ice cream is true? In other words, is my laptop going to fall for me but not for somebody else? No, the law of gravity works regardless of our personal opinion about it, right? If you think the law of gravity doesn't apply to you, you're still going to be butting your head up against that wall, so to speak, the moment you drop that laptop. You're going to have a reality check. Or as Pastor Reese likes to say, you're going to get a checkup from the neck up real fast. Because this is a true statement regardless of the subject. It's not subject specific. It doesn't matter who it's being applied to or who's saying it, because the truth of this lies in the object that it's talking about. A laptop is an object on which gravity is going to act, right? Regardless of whether we believe that to be true or not. So do other people need to agree or abide by objective truths? Yes, you can't escape objective reality. Your personal subjective belief about something doesn't change an objective truth. All right, does that make sense so far? Hopefully. All right, so I want to highlight a key distinction, and this is all kind of setting up this conversation that I had with this gentleman recently about personal beliefs. What happens is many skeptics that I have talked to over the years, including this gentleman whose conversation we're going to highlight here in a moment, continue to confuse personal belief with subjective truth. Those are not the same thing. Now, remember, subjective truth is subject specific. It is something that is true for that subject. But that's not the same thing as saying a belief. We can have beliefs about objective truths and subjective truths. The two statements I gave you, the first statement was mint chocolate chip is the best flavor of ice cream. I believe that. The second statement is if I drop my laptop off a cliff, it's going to fall. I also believe that. Both of those are beliefs that I hold. The mere fact that I believe something doesn't automatically make it a subjective truth just because I'm a subject, all right? We have to ask, what is the belief pointing to, all right? You can have a belief that points to a subjective truth. I believe mint chocolate chip ice cream is the best flavor. You can also have a belief that points to an objective truth. I believe that if I drop my laptop, it's going to fall off a cliff. All right. So just because something is a belief that is held by someone, that does not automatically make it a subjective truth. It's just a belief. We have to ask what that belief is pointing toward. All right. That is, again, when we get to this conversation here shortly, you're going to see where this where this goes. Now, let me give you a little bit of a setup before I move on to the next slide here. So you understand the conversation, what it was in reference to is I had in this video made a statement that everyone, when the chips are down, regardless if they say they believe moral truth is subjective. By moral truth, I just mean moral statements, okay? Like murder is wrong, all right? Stealing is wrong, is morally wrong. You shouldn't do that. Those are statements that I'm saying I believe are true. I believe it is true that murder is wrong. So when we're talking from a moral perspective, the question is, when I say murder is wrong, is that just a subjective truth? Is that just something that's true for me but might not be true for you? Or is that something that's objectively true? Meaning, even if I think murder is right, is perfectly fine, is A-okay, there is a higher standard above any of our opinions that dictates that I'm wrong. You know, I may think that, but I'm wrong. There is an absolute standard of morality that says murder is wrong. You shouldn't do it, regardless of what you personally subjectively believe. All right. So what I had said in this video is that there are plenty of people who claim to believe that morality is just subjective, that we all have our own moral truth. I have what I think is right and wrong. You have what you think is right and wrong. But that's all it is. It's just personal opinions, basically, and that's all morality is. But the point I made was, but nobody lives consistently that way. Nobody actually lives like that's what they believe. Because the moment they have their wallet stolen or their car stolen, they don't just say, well, I think it was wrong for you to steal my car, but you obviously think it was right for you to steal my car. So because there's no higher standard above us to judge between our two opinions, I guess I really don't have any right to tell you you're wrong, so keep the car. Nobody says that. As soon as someone has something wrong done to them, they immediately jump up and down and start shouting, that was wrong, give me my car back. Well, hold on a second, though. If moral beliefs are just subjective, what right do you have to demand that someone else agree with your subjective moral belief? You don't. That's the setup that we did earlier, right? Is that a subjective belief is just true for the subject. And you don't have, people don't have to agree. It's for me to, if I say all morality is subjective, and I think stealing cars, somebody else's car, is morally wrong, but that's just a subjective belief. So maybe you think it's morally right. Well, the moment you steal my car, if I walk up to you and say, that was wrong, give me my car back, that is the exact same thing, logically speaking, as me walking up to you and saying, you have to believe mint chocolate chip is the best flavor of ice cream. It makes no sense if morality is subjective. But the moment, if I walk up to you and say, you have to give me my car back, I'm not just saying you have to have the same opinion I do. What I'm saying is I think there is a higher standard of what morality really says, irrespective of what you may believe it says. You may think it's okay to steal my car, but you're wrong. It's not. And when I say you're wrong, I'm not just saying I personally think you're wrong. What I'm saying is you're really wrong. And so that was the point that I made in this video, is that nobody actually lives like they think moral beliefs are subjective. When the chips are down, when something is done to them, they always get mad about it, right? They always object and say, no, you did something wrong, give me my car back. All right, hopefully that makes some degree of sense. And I will say, as much as I'm sitting here saying that I'm talking about skeptics, many skeptics understand this. Many atheists understand this concept. There's a book by Sam Harris called The Moral Landscape that came out a few years ago. Now, I do not recommend the book. I'll be honest with you. It's his argumentation is not good. It's funny because he presented this as if he was trying to show essentially that we could have objective morality without God. And he acted like he was coming up with this brand new moral theory, almost like never before thought of. Somebody thought of how science and all this can actually prove morality. And then it didn't take very long for pretty much the entire philosophical community, both theist and atheist alike, to say, dude, what you just described is called utilitarianism. It's been around for hundreds of years. We all know about it already. And it's got a lot of problems, and here's what they are. And so it just seemed that Sam Harris wasn't even aware of what utilitarianism is, because he thought he was doing something new, and he wasn't. He was doing something old, and needless to say, he didn't respond in his book to any of the classic problems that utilitarianism has. But I give him credit for this. He at least realized that morality has to be objective, that we all act like it is. We all act like when somebody does something that we think is wrong, that it's really wrong. They're not just doing something against our personal preference, they're doing something objectively wrong. And this is something where he tried to explain his position in his book. He said, when I speak about objective moral truths or about the objective causes of human well-being, I am not denying the necessarily subjective, i.e. experiential component of the facts under discussion. I'm certainly not claiming that moral truths exist independent of the experience of conscious beings, like the Platonic form of the good, or that certain actions are intrinsically wrong. I am simply saying that given that there are facts, real facts, to be known about how conscious creatures can experience the worst possible misery and the greatest possible well-being, it is objectively true to say that there are right and wrong answers to moral questions, whether or not we can always answer these questions in practice. I mean, I disagree with a lot of what he had to say there, probably pretty obviously. For example, when he says in there that he disagrees that there are certain actions that are intrinsically wrong. I mean, no, I disagree with him that they are intrinsically wrong because they violate God's character, but that's a whole different matter. I don't think he adequately explains how morality can be objective on an atheistic worldview. I think he fails pretty significantly in that regard. But he does seem to appreciate the distinction we've been talking about, that he's not saying that just because morality is objective, that it has to be completely independent of belief, that he's not saying that just because you believe something that automatically means it's subjective. I mean, so I give him credit for that. He does not say that. He lays that out pretty clearly, that no, you still believe something, and just because you believe it doesn't mean it's not an objective truth. The question is not whether you believe it, it's what does that belief point toward? Does it point toward an objective truth, or does it point toward a subjective truth? All right. Another very famous philosopher that got this is Friedrich Nietzsche. All right, and this is a portion of I guess you could call it a poem. He calls it The Parable of the Madman. And it's a lot longer than this. This is just a really quick excerpt. He said, the madman jumped into their midst and pierced them with his eyes. Whither is God, he cried. I will tell you, we have killed him, you and I. Nietzsche's an atheist, by the way, in case you didn't grasp that. But then look what he says. After he mentions that essentially it's his poetic way of saying God doesn't exist. We've eliminated the need for people to believe in God anymore. And then he goes on to talk about the ramifications of there not being God. He says, are we not plunging continually, backward, sideward, forward, in all directions? Is there still any up or down? Are we not straying as through an infinite nothing? And he goes on and on and on from there. But the point is that if there is no God, he's questioning whether we can have a lot of these objective moral truths that we cling to. Is there even such thing as a lot of these objective truths that we've always taken for granted? Because if there's no God to fix them, then we end up just flailing everywhere. So again, one last example, and then we will launch into the actual internet discussion that I had with this gentleman recently. Think of it this way. This is an example I'd like to give. Imagine that Joe's walking down the street, whistling a happy tune, and then all of a sudden I come out of a dark alley without him seeing me and just punch him in the face. Now, Joe immediately, after he says, ow, he looks at me and says, Ken, why did you punch me in the face? And I said, I don't know. Thought it'd be a good idea at the time. And Joe says, I think you did something legally wrong. According to the government law, the civil law, I think what you did was legally wrong, and I am going to sue you. And I tell Joe, I said, Joe, you know what? I think I was legally right. And Joe says, nope, you were legally wrong. I said, nope, I was legally right. We go back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. Is there a way for us to resolve our differences? In other words, let's assume that Joe really does believe that I was legally wrong to punch him, and I really do believe that I was legally right to do it. All right? Is there a way to decide which one of us is actually right and which one of us is actually wrong? Of course there is. We can open up a law book, right? We can go to court, all right? I mean, you open up a law book and you look up, assault and battery, guess what it's going to say? Ken, you were legally wrong. You may legitimately think the law was on your side, but it's not. You are incorrect in that belief. That's an objective standard. It's a standard that is above either one of our personal opinions, above either what Joe or I personally think to be true. It says this is what's actually true. Now change the scenario just a little bit so that instead of Joe and I disagreeing about whether I was legally right to punch him, we're disagreeing as to whether I was morally right to punch him. Joe says, I think you were morally wrong. I say I was morally right, morally wrong, morally right. We go back and forth and back and forth. Just like we had that law book in the legal example, is there a standard of the moral law that is above either one of our opinions to decide whether or not I am legally, or I'm morally correct or I'm not morally correct to do that? Christianity would say, yes, there is that transcendent standard. It's in God's character, which is a podcast for the other day explaining how all that works. But we can point to God, right? And say God's character decides what is actually morally right and what is actually morally wrong. The question is, on atheism, do you have that higher standard? If all we are is time plus matter plus chance, and all we are is the atoms that make us up, the physical world is all there is, then there is, by definition, nothing transcendent above us. No moral standard above us that can dictate that. That's what Nietzsche was grasping at. He's saying once we eliminate God, we don't have that higher standard to anchor us anymore. And again, tonight we're specifically talking about moral beliefs. We don't have a moral anchor. So all we're left with is people's differences of opinion. Again, Sam Harris understood that he tried to argue for that standard even without God. He failed to do so, but at least he understood that arguing that there's an objective moral standard is independent of is not necessarily tied to our belief. In other words, just because I believe something to be morally wrong does not automatically make that a subjective statement. It could be a belief I hold that's pointing to an objective truth. All right, so with all that set up, let's get to the actual conversation. Like I said, the original video was me saying, look, regardless of whether you say you think morality is objective or subjective, you may say you believe it's subjective, it's all just personal opinion, or sometimes I'll say it's cultural level, but regardless, it's all just in the subjects. When the chips are down, that's not how you behave. You act like it's objective. And the specific statement I think I made in the video was, everybody as a practical matter assumes there is an objective morality, right? As a practical matter, meaning how we live. You may say you think differently, but as a practical matter, when you watch how you behave like you don't think morality is merely matters of personal opinion and subjectivity. All right, so here was the first comment that this gentleman made. And again, this was about 6 months ago when he made it. I just saw it recently the other day. Contrary to popular belief, I don't live in the comments section constantly looking for things to disagree about. But he said, he's quoting me here, everybody as a practical matter assumes there is an objective morality. And his response is, nope, maybe you need to get, I'm assuming he means maybe you need to get out more often, meet more people, get out of your bubble. One other thing this conversation will illustrate, by the way, folks, as we go through this, is this gentleman is not kind or respectful. You'll see he continues to insult me more and more as we go through this discussion. I'll talk more about that in a little bit later, but yeah, that alone, I mean, I probably shouldn't have responded in the first place because I probably could have predicted how this conversation was going to go. But I will just say going in that while I tried to be gracious as much as possible, I do think looking back on this conversation, I'm not going to hide what I said. I'm going to show you my comments here as well, that there were some things I could have done better. I could have done differently. That I look back on them afterwards and realize, yeah, you know what? Yeah, maybe that didn't come across as graciously as it should have. I thought I was trying to be funny, but sometimes, especially with a typewritten word, that doesn't work so well. But anyway, so this was the original comment to me, just note maybe you need to get out more often, meet more people, get out of your bubble. To which I gave this reply, right? I said, key phrase, as a practical matter. If someone steals your car, your options are to either, one, let them have it, because even though you think it was wrong, they must have thought it was okay, and there is no objective standard to determine between your two opinions. Or two, admit I'm right. Which one will it be? I know it's hard to admit I am right and you were not, but at least you get to keep your car. And that's the statement. I shouldn't have said that. I shouldn't have said that. I thought I was being funny. Hey, at least you get to keep your car. But I look back on that now and I'm like, yeah, that came across as a little more snarky than I probably should have. So I will admit I should not have made that last statement. But what I'm pointing out to him is, again, we're talking about as a practical matter. Bear in mind, my argument here was never that morality is objective. What the argument was, what the whole thing that started this was me saying people act like they believe it is. So that's what he needs to disagree with. That's what he needs to disprove, is not give me his difference of opinion about whether morality actually is objective or subjective, but do people act like they think morality is objective, even if they say it's subjective when the chips are down? All right? So that was my initial response. Moving on, he says this. He says, I can objectively show that I purchased the car. Also, you are referencing reactions to the car being stolen. Those are independent of whether it is objectively immoral to steal the car. Try another example because that one just failed. Well, he gave back to me the same snark, I guess, that I inadvertently gave him. So you already see hopefully what's going on here. He's already getting sidetracked, right? Look what he just said here. It says those are independent of whether it is objectively immoral to steal the car. That's not what we're talking about. That's not what the discussion is. The discussion is, do people act like they believe morality is objective? Not, is morality actually objective? I know it's a fine, nuanced difference, but it is a significant one. It's, how do people act? When the chips are down, do people act consistent with their beliefs that morality is subjective? Or do they act inconsistent with their belief, like they think that there actually is a higher moral standard than that other person who just violated and did something objectively wrong to them? So anyway, moving on here, I'll stop as we go through a couple of these things to highlight them more. So this was my next response to him, kind of highlighting some of what I just said. I said, no, it didn't. What does you objectively showing you bought the car have to do with anything? That isn't a moral fact at all. In other words, just saying you own a car, that in and of itself means nothing as far as morality is concerned, unless there's a rule that says it is wrong to steal someone else's car, which I say here in a second. I said it only becomes relevant if we assume a moral standard, that it is wrong to steal a car that someone else has purchased. But without that moral assumption, the fact that you own it means nothing. The reactions to stealing the car are precisely the point. Again, this is me getting back, trying to bring this conversation back to what originally started it. The point here is, how do people behave? All right. Do they behave like they think morality is subjective, or do they behave like they think morality is objective? If what we're talking about is how do people behave, then people's reactions are exactly what we should be talking about, isn't it? That's exactly what is relevant. Then I go on to give an example that hopefully most people have heard before. It says your behavior shows what you really believe, regardless of what you say you believe. If someone says they love you, but repeatedly treats you like garbage, do you believe they really love you? I'm sure you've heard the expression, actions speak louder than words. If you say you think morality is subjective, but then as soon as somebody does something to you, you act like it's objective, i.e. like they actually did something wrong, then as a practical matter, there's those words again, right? You live as if morality were objective. To put it back on you, try again, because nothing you just said disproves my example. So again, I ask, would you act like the culprit did nothing objectively wrong and just let him have the car, or would you admit I'm right? You're still stuck in the same dilemma. And you'll notice he didn't answer that question initially. He does eventually. We'll get to there. But he didn't answer that question of, well, would you just let him have the car? Because again, remember, folks, if you think morality is subjective, that means it doesn't rise above the personal level. So I may have my personal moral belief, you may have your personal moral belief, but there's no standard above us by which that I could appeal to say my belief is the right one and your belief is the wrong one. So if you steal my car, I may personally believe that you were wrong to do that. But in the moment I say, and therefore you should give it back to me, I'm not acting like it's just my personal belief. I'm acting like there's a higher standard that you need to abide by, whether or not you agree with it. And that's me acting like I believe morality is objective. All right. And that's where the inconsistency, people can say they believe something, but they don't live consistently with what they say they believe. And then we get to his next comment. He says, I don't need to think stealing is objectively wrong to be upset about my car being stolen. Example failed. Try again. Well, he's right. You don't need to be stealing is objectively wrong to be upset about it. But that, again, is not the point, right? I'll just, I was going to comment a little bit more, but I'm just going to go on and show the next statement here where I said this. I said, really? Do you routinely get upset about things when nothing wrong has happened? All right. So that would be curious indeed, to say the least. In other words, if you didn't think that they actually did something wrong to you, why are you upset? Why are you upset? If you believe morality is subjective and you're consistent with that belief, you have no reason to be upset. And you might be disappointed, like I say in the rest of this example. I said, when someone, for example, buys the last apple at the grocery store and you really wanted it, sure, you may be disappointed, but do you walk up to them and insist they give the apple to you? I would guess not. But I would also wager if someone took your car, you'd want it back. You wouldn't just be upset, you'd insist they return the car. And that, my friend, shows you do think something wrong happened. Sorry, but you haven't argued your way out of the corner yet. So again, we keep coming back to, would you insist on them returning your car or not? Will you finally answer the question? If you would, then you are admitting I'm right. If not, at least you'd be consistent, but somehow I don't think you'd be telling the truth. And again, that's another one that I think I could have been more gracious about the way I phrased it. The tactic itself is sound. In other words, when you've posed a question for someone to answer and they repeatedly dodge it and they don't answer it, it is a perfectly legitimate tactic, conversational tactic, to bring them back to it and to not let them get away with that and to say, no, I asked you a question and you haven't answered it yet. So why don't we go back here and answer, I need you to answer this question. But I did it in a way that I could have been more gracious about it. I will say that. So the tactic itself was fine. The way I went about it, maybe not so much. All right. So the point here that I was, again, trying to bring it back to what the original disagreement was supposedly about, was the original agreement was people act like they actually think that morality is objective, not they believe it's subjective. And you see what he keeps doing. He keeps making the mistake we outlined at the beginning. And you're going to see this even more in his later comments, where he keeps acting like the mere fact that he believes something means it is a subjective belief. And we've already seen that's not true. You can believe, your belief can point to either a subjective truth or an objective truth. The mere fact that you believe something does not settle the dispute, so to speak. It does not settle everything and automatically mean, oh, it's a subjective truth just because you happen to believe it. That would be like me saying, I believe 2 + 2 = 4. I hold that belief in my head. Therefore, 2 + 2 = 4 is a subjective truth and doesn't necessarily apply to everybody. Do you see how kind of ridiculous that becomes? No, obviously, our beliefs are, in that sense, somewhat, I guess you could say, independent of the truth question, in that, or I should at least say maybe not independent, but they don't resolve. All right, they don't resolve the truth question. That just because I believe something does not resolve whether or not what I believe is objectively true or subjectively true. It's a separate question in that regard. All right, next part. Here we go. All right, so he responds to me. He says, and that, quoting me again, and that, my friend, shows you do think something wrong happened. And here's where the insults really start coming out. He says, child, your challenge is to show that something objectively wrong happened. Stop right there. No, it's not. No, it's not. He's changed the subject of our conversation, hasn't he? That's not what we've been talking about this whole time. My my responsibility is absolutely not to show that something objectively wrong happened. My responsibility is to show that people act like they believe something objectively wrong happened. Actions speak louder than words. Just keep that phrase in mind. That'll help you maybe understand what we're talking about here and what the point of the conversation is that this gentleman seems to keep consistently miss. Actions speak louder than words. You can say you believe something, but I'm going to watch how you act to see if the way you act is consistent with what you say you believe. Because the way you act is really far more telling about what you really believe than what you say you believe. Right? And when you act like morality, there are these objective standards of morality that other people need to abide by, and you act like it's not just your personal preference, but it's an actual moral rule that they need to stick to, well, then you're acting like morality is objective. All right, so he's again, you see he's changing the terms of the conversation. He's changing the terms of the discussion. All right, next one. Let's see, I suggest you look up the term, let's see, blah, 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 blah. I suggest you look up the term objective before continuing to make a fool of yourself. I kind of know what objective means, dude. All right, moving on. It says, so again, he's quoting me again. So again, we keep coming back. Would you insist on them returning your car or not? Will you finally answer the question? And thankfully, he does. So I give him credit. Third time's the charm, I guess. He finally does answer the question. He says, yes. And therefore, what? That does not differentiate between objective moral facts and subjective moral facts. No, but it shows that you're acting like you think it's objective. That's the point. The point is, what are your actions showing versus what is your mouth showing? All right? What are you saying you believe versus what are you acting like you believe? The moment you insist on getting the car back, you're not acting like you believe morality is subjective anymore. Because if you were, you would say, yeah, it's my belief, that's your belief, can't decide between the two. Literally, it would be you asking for your car back. If you really believe morality is subjective, it's like you telling someone else they have to believe mint chocolate chip is the best flavor of ice cream. And you see, when we look at in that context, those other subjective truths, things that we all clearly recognize as subjective truths, you start to see how just, frankly, ridiculous this position is. All right? But anyway, he doesn't recognize that, obviously. So moving on here, he says, again, quoting me, if you would, then you are admitting I'm right. And he wants to insult me some more. Says, how so, child? I can subjectively believe they should return my car. Yes, you can. But the moment you insist that they also believe that is when you're acting like morality's objective, not subjective anymore. That's the point that you keep missing here. That you've been arguing vapor this entire time. Get educated, then get back to me. All right, what you should know about the next comment, the next comment I made to him was longer. You can find it on the YouTube channel if you want. I don't have it on my next slide here because it is longer. But at this point, I did kind of say something that I should have said at the beginning. And that was that, look, you know what? I don't think you're committed to reason. I said, you have launched a lot of ad hominem attacks, personal insults at me. And look, I don't care. People can insult me all they want. It doesn't matter to me at all. I got news for you. I don't give two figs what this person thinks about me. I do not judge my worth by what some internet commenter says about me, okay? I judge my value from what God says my value is. So it doesn't faze me at all. I don't care. That being said, it does say something about him, all right? And I did explain this in the comment. I tried to do so as graciously as possible, that I said, look, understand this. When you engage in conversations, and this holds true for Christians too. The reason I bring this up, because this isn't just atheists that do this, folks. It's Christians as well. When you engage in conversations and you feel the need to constantly insult people, there's a logical term for that. It's called the ad hominem fallacy, all right, which just means you're attacking the person instead of the argument. Him calling me child, telling me to get educated, all this kind of stuff. Those are just insults at me. What that communicates to anyone, any rational person listening to you, is and I'm not saying this is true, but understand this is the impression you are creating. When I hear someone that just every single comment has to throw an insult in there, has to act holier than thou, has to act like they're so brilliant and intelligent and blah, 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 that tells me you don't know what you're talking about. That tells me that you are not a person that it is worth even having a conversation with. For a couple of reasons. One, when you resort to insults, it communicates that you don't have enough confidence in your ability to advance your arguments. You don't have enough confidence in your arguments to win the day on their own merits. And so you have to try to influence just by insulting people. It's what I call the schoolyard bully approach. You know, when we were all in elementary school, everybody probably remembers a schoolyard bully, right? And they would bully some other kid. And what is a sad truth is many times children would take the side of the bully, cozy up to the bully, instead of defending the kid who's getting bullied. Why? It's not because they think the bully is correct in doing what he or she is doing, but it's because they don't want to be the next one bullied, right? They don't want to be the next one targeted. And so acting this way can be an effective way to get people to rally to your cause. We see this, unfortunately, in our culture today, that so many people love it when an epic burn is handed down, right? It's going to go viral. Everybody's going to say, yeah, they're going to get all this cheering section behind you. I mean, you actually had Richard Dawkins, this is years ago now, at the Reason Rally in Washington, D.C., get up and tell a bunch of atheists that their strategy when they're going out there and interacting with Christians is they should ridicule them, mock them, ridicule them in public, he said. What? It's effective in rallying other people around you that just think it's funny or it's cool because we live in a fallen culture and people are attracted to that. They shouldn't be, but they are. But it's also completely illogical. I mean, like I said, there's even a logical fallacy named for it. It's called the ad hominem fallacy, right? It just shows it broadcasts, it communicates to the world that you don't know what you're talking about. Because if you did know what you were talking about, you would present your argument to me, not an insult. And so I do say, my general piece of advice is when you come across someone on the internet like this, it's just not worth talking to them. It's just not. I probably talked to this gentleman far longer than I should have. After he made this last comment, though, I did, in my explanation, did say, I'm not going to participate in this conversation anymore. Because the other thing it communicates is not just that you don't really have as much confidence in your argument as you claim to, but it also shows me that you are not interested in rationality at all. You are letting your emotions come through so much that you are clearly driven by your emotion. I got news for you. This gentleman right now, if you ever watch this episode, which you may or may not, I don't know. I'm telling you right now, the impression you have created is that your opinions are not held on the basis of logic or reason. You do not hold your opinions based on logic and reason. Because if you did, you would defend them based on logic and reason, but you don't, all right? You defend them based on being a bully, insulting people, all right? That tells me that your opinions, because you lash out emotionally so much that when someone challenges you, you're feeling personally attacked because you have this strong emotional attachment to what you want to be true. And so when someone says something, even if they say it in the most gracious manner possible, which I've already conceded, and I apologize for, some of my comments were not as gracious as they should have been, all right? But even when someone says it in the most gracious manner possible, you feel like this belief that you have such a strong emotional attachment to is being threatened. And when that happens, you lash out emotionally, not logically. And that's what you communicate, all right, when you behave in this manner. So I did, after his last comment, when he was again calling me child again and throwing all these insults out, I did say, look, dude, I'm not going to comment anymore. All right, this is going to be my last one, and this is why. Because I don't think that anything I have to say is going to get through to you. Now, I did respond a little bit as my last stab at it, if you want to say that, to what he had to say. And this was his response to one thing that I said. The top part is a quote of what I said in that part of that last comment. I said, the moment you insist they return it, regardless of their personal subject or morality, you are assuming that your moral standard is right and theirs, I misspelled theirs, man, I just saw that, and theirs is wrong, such that you are entitled to tell them to return it. That's the definition of objective morality. And then he responds again with another insult. No, child, that is not even close to the definition. Objective means something is true, independent of mind. That is the definition. Dude, no, it's not. Hold on, I lost my place here on my screen. Yeah, the definition, he says he believes the definition of objective is it's independent of mind. Really? Is his statement that objective morality means independent of the mind, independent of his mind? Think it through for a second. Like Chandler said in an old episode of Friends, get there faster, you know. If that statement is completely independent of his mind, then that would mean he never thought it, he didn't believe it, it has nothing to do with his mind. So he's basically saying he doesn't actually believe it. He said it, but he doesn't actually believe it because it's independent of his mind. Obviously, he believes the statement to be true or he wouldn't have said it in the first place, right? But if he believes it, that means it's not independent of his mind. Again, according to his own standard, the moment he says, he believes it, so it's not independent of his mind. But according to him, the definition of objective is independent of the mind, which would mean he's admitting by his definition, his statement, objective morality means independent of the mind, is in itself a subjective statement. Because he believes it, it's in his mind, so it's not independent of his mind. But if it's not independent of its mind, then it can't be objective. It has to be subjective. So he's literally admitting by his own, what he set himself up with, okay? He's admitting that his belief of this is the definition of objective is really just a subjective belief. If you don't get that, that's fine. But it's kind of humorous when he says that the definition of objective is independent of the mind. Really, is that statement in of itself independent of your mind? No, it's not. Therefore, by your own standard, that should be a subjective statement. But you're certainly not offering it as a subjective statement. You're offering it as an objective definition of objective morality. The fact of the matter is he's just wrong, folks. He's just wrong. Sam Harris understands that he's wrong. Friedrich Nietzsche understands that he's wrong. That is not the definition of objective. In order, a belief in an objective truth does not mean it's independent of the mind, all right? Because whether or not something's independent is, we believe something. Again, this gets back to what we said at the very beginning. You can have a belief in your mind, and that belief can point to an objective truth, or it can point to a subjective truth. The mere fact that it's in your mind, the mere fact that you believe it, does not make it subjective. Again, do you believe that 2 + 2 = 4? Well, that belief is not independent of your mind because you hold that belief in your mind, don't you? That's where it resides. It's in your mind. So it's not independent of your mind. But does the fact that that belief is in your mind all of a sudden mean 2 + 2 = 4 is not an objective truth? Of course not. Because belief and truth are two different things. But this gentleman and many, many atheists I talk to keep confusing that point. They don't see the distinction between belief and truth. And they act like subjective truth is the same thing as subjective belief. They're not, all right? There's a different thing. You can have a belief that points to an objective truth. You can have a belief that points to a subjective truth. All right. That was a nice big philosophical episode tonight, wasn't it? If you had any questions about it, again, feel free to go ahead and put them in the comment section after the fact. I'll try to look at them. Like I said, I do not live in the comment section, but I do try to take a look at them every now and then just to respond to folks, answer any questions that come up, things like that. But I'm going to tell you right now, if you start out by calling me a child, guess what? Probably not going to answer you. I'm not going down that rabbit hole again, because again, you're just communicating to me that you're not worth talking to. You're not worth having a conversation. I'm interested in having conversations with people who are interested in having real conversations, who are committed to the laws of logic, who are committed to reason and rationality, and are committed to just, frankly, basic general courtesy and kindness. If that's not you, hey, you can comment if you want to, but I'm telling you right now, I'm not going to answer you because you're just not worth a conversation. There is no conversation there. All you wanted, people like that, like this gentleman here, frankly, all he wants to do is hear himself speak. If you want to hear yourself speak, great. You got your own channel. Do what you want. You can comment here on this video. I don't care. Comment to your heart's content. All right? And you can hear yourself speak all you want. But clearly, you're not interested in hearing what anybody else has to say. So I'm not going to say it. I'm not going to take the bait. All right? And I would advise all Christians out there to do the same. All right? Ladies and gentlemen, that's all I got for this evening. Thank you very much. Just a quick reminder. Hold on a second. Where am I? This I want to get rid of. There we go. All right. Just a quick reminder that if you have a question that you would like to see us answer on a future episode of Hey, Ask Me Stuff, you go here, trinityjoppa.org/askmestuff. Fill out that questionnaire, that form. You can do it anonymously. It's fine. Submit your question, and you might see it on a future episode. Also, just a quick reminder, if you haven't subscribed to the YouTube channel, go ahead and do that. I'm sure we'll come up with another goal to talk about at some point, but I'll probably wait till after June because, this 2,500 goal was supposed to be by June 30th. So I'm probably going to wait to see where we are at on June 30th at this point and then set our next goal accordingly. All right. That's all I got, folks. Thank you very much for joining me this evening or joining me whenever it is you're watching this after the fact. I do hope to be back on again next week, Tuesday, 6:30 p.m. I don't know what the question's going to be. We'll find out. Maybe your question. Maybe you submit something in the meantime. It's a very, very busy time around here, which is unfortunately why I wasn't able to be on last week. I just had way too much to do. So I can't make promises about being on next week. It depends on my workload. But that is my plan right now to be on again next Tuesday, 6:30. Hope we can see you then. God bless.
Thank you.